Today we're going to start looking at getting our chillies planted out, and we've really been waiting for night temperatures to be a minimum of 10 Celsius, but ideally sort of 12 Celsius would be absolutely great. So if your night temperatures are still not quite there, then we don't want to put these out yet. So hopefully your plants are starting to look quite big. They should still be putting on some flower buds that we're going to have a look at removing still, and then also they should be starting to pop on some side shoots as well. Now they may still be absolutely fine for a little bit longer in these pots, but it is worth having a check on them. And if they need potting up because your night temperatures aren't quite warm enough, then you'll want to do that just to make sure that the growth continues doing well. When it comes to pots for these chillies to go in, something like a coir pot can be really helpful. They don't like actually being too wet, so these help them dry out that little bit quicker. I'm going to be looking at potting them into pots like this. So these are 12-litre pots and they sell for about £2.50 each. They got some good drainage in the bottom. So really we'd be looking for a minimum of 10 litres if you can manage that. If you have got a local Morrison's or a little shop that sells off flower buckets, so these are the ones that the flowers, cut flowers, come in, and then they often just sell them as a bunch of 5 or something like that, but they are sold really quick. They're sturdy enough and they would be about 10 litres. So they would be a really good one to look out for as well if you don't want to break the bank. And then you just want to make sure that you put some decent sized holes in the bottom to make sure they drain well. Another option that would be a little bit bigger but around the same sort of size would be a builder's bucket, and you usually find places like B&Q that will sell them at £1 per bucket. So we don't need to spend too much on the pots that we are going to be popping these into. If you are planting your chillies outside rather than inside, then you want to pick the most sheltered spot that you can possibly pick. We spoke about this at the very beginning of the grow along in part 1. So it is absolutely possible to grow them in a sheltered patio. You may find that they don't produce quite as much, but if you do have an undercover space, then they are really going to prefer that protection. The other option is to provide them with something like a flexible greenhouse and stack them in there, and they'll do absolutely fine in there as well. Just a little bit of additional heat, and then if it does get colder during the evenings or below 7 degrees, then you can just shut them up and it'll give them that little bit more protection. If you do have a very late frost like we did last year, then just get some frost cloth or even an old bed sheet and just lay it over them. If you can manage to hold it off of the leaves, then that will be really helpful, but just something is going to give them more protection than nothing, and then hopefully they'll be absolutely fine. Or if you're able to bring them inside, then that's an option as well. So out of the peppers that you've grown, you may have quite a few like I do, and then you want to go through and select the best ones in order for us to grow ourselves. So the very first thing that I look for is a good thick stem, one that's quite sturdy and that has some really good healthy leaves on it. You can see this one here that's at the back, so the leaves are yellowing and it's dropping some of these leaves, so it's showing some signs of stress. We've got a spider on it there, but you can also check underneath the leaves and make sure that they don't have too many aphids and things like that on, because an infestation at this point could cause us more issues. And bugs usually go for the weaker of the plants. And it's not necessarily the height that we're looking for, so you can see that these ones here, so this is the Palavec that we've been doing in the grow along, and then this is the lemon drop here. So it's a little bit shorter, but you can see that it's doing some really good work with some side shoots, and it's looking very healthy. None of the leaves are curling, which would suggest aphids or something that are hiding in them, and there is no signs of stress. And then the last thing that is worth doing on these is just to tip them upside down and check that they are looking good underneath. So the roots are looking healthy, there's plenty of growth, there is still room in this one for more if it needed to stay in its pot for that little bit longer. And then we'll have a look at this one as well. And that one's producing some really good roots. So those two are definitely ready to go into their final positions. Before getting these plants potted up, it is going to be really important to make sure they're hardened off well. So if you haven't started that and they're still in the house particularly, Then we want to start moving them into an area of shade outside where it's quite protected, and then slowly move them into the sunshine and just increase the amount of time that they spend outside each day and the conditions that they're in, the wind and things like that. And we'd expect this to take to around a week roughly. If they've been in your greenhouse or polytunnel and they're going outside, then you can usually get away with around 3 to 4 days of doing this. If they're in your greenhouse or polytunnel and they're actually staying in there, then you can just plant them straight up because they're not having any change of environment. So I'm using 2 different types of peat-free compost today, and this is mainly to see how they both get on separately. So this is one that I actually won, so I want to see how this one does. It also comes with a slow release fertilizer that you pop in, and then that will help feed the plants. It's quite a fibrous compost. You can see some wood shavings in there. The things I've grown it so far have done really well. And then this is the other compost that I'm using, and this is from Durston's. It's also peat free, and they've actually changed their mix, so I'm going to be interested to see how this one gets on. This one has a grow boost, so I wouldn't be adding anything to it because we don't want it to have too many nutrients in there. So do have a look at what you've got. If you've got some slow release fertilizer, then you can add it if you don't have any already in the compost when you begin. This is the Incredibloom peat-free compost, and this is the extra feed that you get to add to it. So I'm just going to give this a good mix before adding it into the pot. I'm just going to tip it upside down, making sure to support it as we do, and then just gently pop the chilli in, and then add some additional compost around the edges. Leaving about an inch at the top of the pot, and that's going to help us make sure that we can water it in well. This is the Durston's compost that we've got here. And once again, we're just going to lower the plant in and add some more compost. So the next thing we're going to do is remove any of these flowers that are actually being produced by the plant already. This can seem really counterintuitive, but actually what it's going to do is encourage the plant to continue focusing on putting on more roots and more growth, and then therefore more flowers in the long run for us. So just grab them between your fingers and pinch them off. Wait for them to be large enough if they aren't already to do this, or you can leave them on and see how they do. And if your plant is quite large, then you wouldn't need to necessarily do that at this point. I'm just going to gently water these in. We want to give them a good soak each time, but we do want to let them dry out in between every single watering. And the best way of doing this, if we're growing in pots, is to lift the pots and see whether they're heavy. If you're growing them in the ground, then just poke your finger beside it. If they're still really quite damp, then we're going to leave it for another couple of days. Obviously, if it's raining lots, then we can't necessarily control this. But if you've got them in an undercover space, then we can keep them drier than we can elsewhere. So that's them all watered in now and ready to start getting bigger and see how well they do for the crop. We may find that they do require some sort of support at some point. That will depend on the size of the plant and whether or not it's starting to get knocked by any wind or anything. If you are concerned, then it is worth popping a cane in just to make sure that they're not going to be getting weak by any wind that is against them. And then over here you can see on this aubergine that my leaf isn't looking very happy. So if you've got any like that are on your pepper plants, you can either just pull the leaf down and it might snap off, or snip it off, and that will help the rest of the leaves do well. It will also discourage any of the pests that like to come and eat our unhealthy leaves from causing us any issues. Once these plants are established, at that point we can start looking at feeding them. But when we actually need to do this is going to depend on the compost that you've used and whether or not there is any feed in it. So the best way really that I usually find that this will work is by really keeping an eye on the plants themselves. And if they start yellowing and not looking very happy, then at that point we can start adding some feed. But if your bag is saying that it may provide maybe 6 weeks or 8 weeks of feed, then hopefully we won't need to do it in that time. And we can cause ourselves issue by overfeeding them as well as underfeeding them. So we really want to just sort of see how they go. Please let me know if you have any questions at all, and then we will next have a look at these again when they've got that little bit bigger and they've started to flower and fruit for us as well.